Um, no, Jason sent me the microphone. He didn't realize that the reason I use my headphones is that there's always background noise uh
Mm,
and but I think this microphone cuts out background noise pretty well too. Um yeah, but I have been thinking of deleting the podcast just because I don't want just on a very simple level, I don't want to be so identified with my ideas. It can be interpreted in different ways and pretty much all of them are true.
yes. But like I was saying, if I mean, and this is probably apropos to the conversation that I think you were wanting to have about Catholicism, because although what I'm everything, all highest order ways of discussing any topic have a it's a self-resolving paradox, a coincidence of opposites. It's the identity of identity and non-identity. And
Yeah.
so, even though people tend to equate and judge someone according to the ideas that they espouse and limit them in a static way to
Yes.
self-identity
Yes.
regarding those labels, uh, who cares? Lean into it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. There was a recording that I did about this that I mistakenly deleted, and but I thought that in it I actually managed to say pretty well a lot of the stuff that hopefully we can get into. But like one of the things was when you bring in the necessarily perspectival nature of truth, people
Hmm.
think that you are bringing in postmodernism. In other
Or
words,
mere subjectivity. Yeah.
right. In other words, they think that if you say everything is personal, then you mean everything is arbitrary. But
Right.
but the thing is, if there was some kind of exhaustive, static, one valued description of reality, let's say, all it could do was that didn't take into account the perceiver, the one who was knowing the description and who was himself changing and
Yeah.
updating the description in light of that knowledge. All such a static description can do is fall over as a two-dimensional cutout. But the weird thing about Catholic theology is how mired it is in substance and object and like the objective truth where like facts don't care about your feelings kind of thing. And then
But of course it would be, right?
yeah, yeah.
No, I agree with you,
But
man.
does that make it
But
wrong though? That's the thing about being right and being wrong and being wrong but being right and submission to authority and the directional nature of truth rather than let's say the literal or one dimensional.
yes, but part so the way that I view all of this stuff is in a very evolution of consciousness way. And so of course, because I think all this stuff happens, reality is fractal, and so all this stuff happens at like a there's a personal existential level, but then there's also a corporate level that's mirroring the same kind of reality and cycle and pattern of call it whatever you want, death and rebirth, or uh the fall, U-shaped journey, like what would that what are those labels? Fall. What is Paul Vanderklay calls it, like fall something redemption. Like it's three, or what is it, three R's, whatever.
Yeah.
Paul has the way of saying it.
Yeah.
But any religious tradition will have that kind of pattern. And I think what is happening collectively or globally, call it the cosmic or the human zeitgeist or the evolution of consciousness of us as a of humanity, big picture, and I see this as fundamentally tied to a lot of Christian theology, is that we're going through like a divided man thing. So I mean, a lot of thinkers have talked about this, like oh, who's that French or not Canadian sociologist who wrote that big tome on like the buffered selves and the porous selves, and I'm blanking on his name now. But anybody talks about this. There's like, or you see it in your own pattern of like infancy. Um, Douglas Harding talks about this infancy to the toddler to the adult to the seer. You have this fall. You have you experience this yourself. You have a fall out of the oceanic oneness with with the mother, which you're experiencing on a physical biological level, but then you also have that psychologically existentially. Like you leave your family, your parents, and you cleave to your wife, and you cycle through this whole pattern. Then you have your own children, and all of those things fundamentally change the way that you perceive reality in real ways because it's part of your own becoming. And then there are things that you knew but you didn't yet know as you ought to know. But going through that becoming and through all those recursions and this infinite regret, these infinite recursions and cycles makes your makes your being different than it was. And I think what's happening in the West is, and I think you see that most clearly. I mean, it's impossible to talk about the West without talking about Catholicism. It's like the same thing. I mean, in to some degree.
Yeah, because
Um,
even Protestantism too is it's almost so negatively defined. It's just not Catholicism.
but it is. But you're right. It's like the
No, no.
Christ
In other
Antichrist,
words,
right? Yeah.
if its definition is merely not Catholicism, then it is Catholicism because its content is inseparable from.
Yes. Yeah. Identity of identity and non-identity. So that's like, what are you protesting? Right. And then that's your label that you're identifying as. And so, exactly, it's the same thing. And so I think what's happening though within that is we are figuring out what self-consciousness is. Because I think that really, I would say largely prior to like the current era, prior to Christ, and this was beginning before Christ too. I mean, it's not just exclusive to Christianity, but that was at the fullness of time where I think self-consciousness largely began, and we're figuring that out. And I think that's what the Catholic Church stuff is. And this is where I think the magisterium and the abstractions and the propositionalism and the confessions, like they're it's one thing to espouse those things, but this is what I think people don't get, which Girard is big on. I think when you do that, when you promote your Christ, what I think you really have to realize, and Langan I think talks about this, and Rollins talks about this a lot, you automatically get the Antichrist. And what the West is figuring out is needs to figure out is how to integrate that. Integrating the shadow, whatever. I mean, it's all the same thing.
If you think about the way that a word refers to its referent,
Mm-hmm.
there's something in there already about like the identity of identity and difference, because the word is different from its
Mm-hmm.
referent. That difference is a precondition for it to refer to that reference. And so Christ and Antichrist, they're there. They're just side by side. Um,
Yeah.
maybe let's
Or
wait.
it's like the shadow. I mean, it's any like the very real physical experience of your own shadow. Like if there's going to be light, there's going to be a shadow. You know. So
So we have
I,
this notion of the sort of uncreated light, like the absolutely transcendent, and that it always has to use these categories or these oppositions in order to make itself intelligible as what it is, and that's very interesting to me. I don't know how much background noise you can hear right now.
none.
Okay.
Yeah, none.
Yeah,
So when you talk about uncreated light, or I'll bring in my fractal Jason Bible stuff of just like the light in which there is no shadow or turning, like that whole, or within like Orthodox hesychasm, I guess that they talk about the experience of the uncreated light. Um, like what is it to have? See, this is where I don't know if this would be consistent with Rollins, and just stop me if this isn't where you're wanting to take this, but like what does it mean to have a light in which there is no shadow? Or because like I can't wrap my head around that kind of being or existence, because being to me entails non-being, which is a very Langian idea, right? It's the contrast. Like in order to have being, you have to have non-being. It's just like it's kind of the non-theistic approach to
I
God, in
mean,
order to have God and not nothingness being the same thing.
it's a certain kind of idea. There's a lot in Langen which is not strictly original or new, and that reminds me of Simone de Laplace, where it's like, sir, the ideas are not new, the arrangement is new. This
Hmm.
is something else I was thinking about with Langen, though. It's like when Nietzsche said, I am born posthumously, I am a destiny. What he meant was like what Peterson meant when he was quoting Jung, where so whatever a man doesn't consciously understand, he's going to act out and it becomes his fate. That's what he means. I am a
Yeah.
destiny. So in other words, Langen is one who I fortunately and unfortunately is like he's good because we're not understanding him now. We're going to act him out, and he's a destiny. He's born posthumously. That's the sense I get about Langen.
Yeah.
But Langen, what he did say, he's so interesting. Like you have to take all the stuff that he just kind of wrote casually on the internet too as part of his corpus. It's so interesting. But he did say something like that, that if existence exists, then non-existence exists. I was thinking about this, like hell for a Catholic hopeful universalist,
Hmm.
hell is like a possibility that is never actualized. That, and when you think about that, it's like, what is the, like when Cormac McCarthy asks, how does the never to be differ from what never was? Or really, you can ask, what is the possibility of something that is never actualized? What is possibility as such? What is that? That is what is necessary in order for actuality to have its content and being. And true actuality is always something there beyond or hinted at, gestured at by this initial opposition of like actuality and possibility. Actuality is like a kind of synthesis or deeper hypostatic underpinning or something, I don't know, of actuality and possibility. And like that's the whole nature of everything. It's like it has this kind of self-referentiality or dialectical quality that you can only
Yeah.
gesture at. You can only gesture at it. And that's like the way I think the Catholic Church is the true church, is not a way that it is itself capable of articulating. It can only gesture at it. And like you have the false ego and you have the true your awareness of like a deeper self, and they exist side by side. And it's almost like in the Catholic Church anyway. uh,
Well,
right.
I mean, I think you, no, I think that's all right, but I think you have to have this is where I think the evolution of consciousness and like the corporate consciousness that we're participating in, because that's necessary, I think, for any, how to say this. I'm trying to keep this, um, I'm trying to figure out how to say it in a way that is succinct and not confusing, because there is a way in which I think an individual or a person can see this reality. But again, this is kind of the whole nature. Do you remember the video that I made on like the difference between the isolated autonomous individual and the divine person? What I was trying to get at is the distinction, because in some sense that is the Christ and the Antichrist, and that is what's happening in the West, is we have this individualism. It's growing out of this. But what I think what that means consciously is there's a way in which an individual, like say whether it's Langen being born posthumously, or Owen Barfield saying like I'm writing for future generations, or Nietzsche or whatever, there are persons, there are individuals, because a person and an individual is like the yin and the yang, the shadow and the real, the true and the false self. There are people that I think see this. To some degree, I think I'm one of those people that sees this um identity of identity and non-identity, and that's what it means to be a person. And like the kind of self-divided God stuff that you can't ever, that you never get. The way that I understand it the best is the Rawlians way. You never get this um, undivided unitive oneness that lacks the lack. Like that thing isn't real. That thing doesn't exist. That is synonymous with nothing. And so if you're pursuing some kind of um so like what that means very practically is like with the Catholic Church to say like this is the true church. Well, always in the kind of consciousness that I'm talking about, you have to always simultaneously, even in saying something affirmative, you're including the negative. So like yes and no. When I say that, I'm saying both yes and no. But to someone who's in the current kind of what I call the divided mind consciousness of like the either orism or the objectivist, they can't even it's like absurdism or nonsense to say that, to say this is why most people are just like, this is why so often people say to me is just like, they think I'm just saying gobbledygook.
They think that you're negating truth, but what you're saying is in some way it's more the
That is truth.
precondition, it's the precondition for truth. If this condition could not be met, then there couldn't be, like, that's what I was saying about because I in the good recording that I threw away, I was reading the Langen's reply to people who claim that Gödel's incompleteness theorem invalidates his theory, which purports to be a theory of everything.
Hmm.
He said that the way that he just runs through the logic in a very interesting way, and the conclusion is that you have to admit that self-reference is the name of the game, and that incorporating this does not it does not negate the idea of truth, but it's seen to be the precondition of truth.
Yeah,
um
that whole etherism, that either orism, because like even that presumption that, what did you just say?
that the Gödel's
That,
incompleteness theorem would invalidate his
yeah,
yeah.
like that mode, that spirit,
No.
the kind of reflexive impulse to do that is the consciousness that doesn't understand the nature of being and consciousness itself.
Yeah, and it's I mean that's definitely the consciousness of, like, I don't know, I mean, like, at least the Catholic Church's own sort of conscious self-articulation, like, of itself, like, it's very much admired in substance and objects, and it's like, this is true in the object, and he's like, you see it objectively, and if and you must believe, you must be compelled to come in, kind of thing, because facts don't care about your feelings,
Yeah.
this whole kind of thing, and that's so interesting. I
Well,
mean,
that's why I call it the either orism.
yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to articulate this. Like when I say the exclusivist religion of the right side of history, which is what I think all individuals, and I say probably individual versus the person, all individuals and all false corporations, false collectives, false bodies who are playing that game, who are presuming the this not that, the unitive oneness that lacks the lack, that's what you will do. You will divide into winners and losers, this not that, without including it, and you will, it's fundamentally a to use Pauline language, it's fundamentally a divisive, backbiting spirit, which
It's not
is what Protestantism is.
it's not the pattern of reality which holds multiplicity together. The pattern of
Yes, it's
reality, and so
yes.
what it means is it's that against which reality is defined. In other words, it's what reality isn't. But reality
Yes,
needs that in order to be what it is, which is like part of the developmental, which is why it's part of the developmental kind of like
right.
Hegelian dialectical progression almost. So
Yes. And so like, and what we're in right now is that Jung quote that you were talking about. Is
mm,
like you say it a little differently than me, but like until you make the unconscious conscious, um how do I remember? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Like that's the way that I remember it. So like you will act this stuff out. But that's divided man. Like that quote to me is what divided man is. It's someone who is not self-conscious of their own self-conscious. So like you've not integrated your shadow. You're not you have not you have not brought into your being the negation of your being. And that and like and collectively that's what confessionalism does. That's what people who say like you have to affirm this statement of faith or this idea or, but like there is a way that you can do that. This is what I think it's always been hard for me to articulate because like I'm not anti-proposition. I'm not anti-confession, but you have to say it in a way that is almost aspirational, that like that includes, that somehow integrates potency and actuality into your confession because you realize you're not there yet. If you can ever confess something and you think you've like arrived, then you're smuggling in that false unitive oneness that doesn't exist, like technically.
yeah, man, it's it's tough for me to keep all my thoughts organized these days, but part of it is like what I saw in Langen's description of sort of necessary, it's like self-referentiality. If there is an infinite regress, it is on the dimension of recursion or self-reference. And that's like every interpretation is embedded in like a deeper interpretation. So like if you have like the theology of the Catholic Church, it's not really where it ends. It's not an exhaustive static description. Just like Aquinas, when he perceived the heavenly realities, that everything I wrote is just straw. In
Hmm.
order for it to run and code and be valid, it has to actually be embedded in a deeper language of interpretation, like its meta language. And and then the thing is, like uh, like sort of to the exclusion of joining the Catholic Church, you can say, well, I'm just going to go formulate some ideas that it doesn't affirm, but which are like the meta language in which it has to be embedded, as far as I can tell. Of course, it's like whatever you come up with, it's gonna itself be embedded in something deeper, if only because in the act of having thought it through and described it, you will have changed it. Um, and So then the question is, like, at that still deeper level of interpretation or of reality, the question is, are you necessarily in greater conformity to it by having gone your own way, or is it possible that a lot of what the Catholic Church believes in is not really true, let's in this literal sense, that even it thinks it's true, but it's true directionally. And you are in greater conformity to deep reality by submitting, um, by believing something for the right motives and submitting, say, to authority, and allowing something to be a mystery which you cannot consciously understand. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I think about in terms of like in term because before I would just think like well, I mean, even up until recently, despite knowing you as long as I have, I would just think, well, why would I join a church whose ideas are wrong? And and that it's funny that I should still think that for as long as I've known you, but it makes me think of how Bertrand Russell considered his relationship with Wittgenstein to be the greatest intellectual adventure of his life, even though all
Mm.
Wittgenstein did was just sabotage all of Russell's attempts to kind of comprehensively propositionalize everything. And Wittgenstein, he was weird. He took a break from philosophy for 10 years and then came back just talking about, like, how it's not, it's like, here's the limits of what you can really say in a language, and here's what can only be gestured at, and you can't really reference it. And the question is whether this kind of dialectical nature of reality can ever be expressed, shall we say, comprehensively, or is it something which can only sort of gesture at? And I think it's the latter, but I think someone like Langen, who's trying to offer a theory of everything, also understands the idea that there's a limit. There are limits to the expressibility of something. I don't know. I mean, this is. I mean, it's obviously all very thinky talky, maybe excessively so.
No, for sure. But what you're trying to articulate, so I would say in my own made up language, that's what iconic thinking is. Is iconic thinking is the thing that includes the negation in the affirmation. So like it includes the unnamed in the named. It includes the thing that you're gesturing toward in the gesture.
Yeah,
Because to gesture to something is to it's just like it's including the apophatic thing pointed toward in the pointing. But I think what has happened in the modern consciousness and this divided man consciousness is we've I would say we've suppressed the truth and unrighteousness, and that we've forgotten the apophatic nature that is necessary and included in our cataphatic assertions of whatever we think we know. We've not included what we do not know in what we know. But like it has to be. And I don't know, and you can't, and to some extent that's not something that you can even explain to anyone. And this is why I'm kind of a it's why I like the Jordan Daniel Wood conversation and the increasing conversation around the nature of a person and hypostases is
Yeah.
because, and this is why I'm a radical, it's why I'm truly a radical personalist, and why I don't think, and again, it's like, to someone who's in the either orism, that they're not going to understand this, but like, you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right. So to make it very practical, to your pursuing the Catholic Church, like, is the Catholic Church full of people that are um dogmatically gesturing to things to which they have no capacity of understanding, but they think they understand? Of course. And like, and they can be, and in that they can be wrong but be right, because like, they don't get it, but they're still pursuing the real thing. But then also, you can come at Catholicism from a, that's just, that that does not affirm all of the magisterium and the articulations, and where you think they're propositionally incorrect, but then yet still voluntarily submit yourself to all of that,
Yeah.
and be, I guess, would that, which one would that be? Would that be right but be wrong?
The question is to what extent can you make yourself believe something that you don't believe, or that you think you don't believe? And this is already just tremendously complicated. Like, can
Well, I think
I
you can get to a point where that question doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I mean, there's just stuff here where it's like, I mean, because for me, I see it as like, it's true at a certain level. Something is true at a certain level of description or false, but then you have to understand that there's something deeper that it's embedded in, like the
Hmm.
fall. Like, what is the fall? The fall is not a literal, like, unless there was two hominids named Adam and Eve, it's not a thing that happened in space time, and yet it's part of the grammar of of causality. It's the fall. Like, it's like some kind of, it's an event, but it's like, it's at a very abstract level of being, kind of. That's not to say that there aren't certain things that are also literal, like what I was talking about with Jason. Like, if there was a symbol that symbolized literality, then, like, which I think the cross does, um then the only way for it to be more true would be if it was also something that literally happened in space time. And so there's almost this kind of ontological bootstrapping there, where, but really, that the same consideration makes me think that, yeah, sure, there's, like, it's all, when Jesus said, Peter, you're a rock, and on you I build my church, he meant like all the churches. Sure, there's that abstract sense, but then there's also that particular literal sense.
Right. That's
There's
why,
that
yes.
one church that is his body, and it has the communion, and that is the real presence. To me, that's haunting in a way that's analogous to, like, if there was a symbol that meant literality, the way that symbolized what is literally true, then what the only way for it to be more true would be if it was. or,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's because you have to, I think, in the thing that's ultimately the most true has to include physical truth. I mean, Paul Vanderklay's been talking about this a lot recently. I mean, to me, that's the nature of incarnation. Like, the kind of Brett Weinsteinian, uh what does he call it? Like, metaphoric truth or something, or even like somewhat of the Petersonian idea, where he's been going down the road of fiction, or Dostoevsky, or like the Bible, and he's just like, is it true? Like, and then when people ask, like, does it literally happen? Which Paul, I think, makes a good distinction, Paul Vanderklay, of saying what you really mean is like physically. When people say literally, what they really mean is like physically, materially. Like, these are people that are smuggling in, like, essentially substance ontology. Like, this is the physical reality is the most real thing. Well, do I think that the most real thing includes that? Yes, because the most real thing is going to include every aspect of truth, which I do think within Christianity and the incarnation and the cross, like you were saying, does include physical truth. But like, it's not within the hierarchy, it's not limited to that, and it's not like um exclusive to that. So like, how can I I'm trying to make concretize and make it more real of what I'm saying. So like, Adam and Eve. Do I think see, it's almost like this question is irrelevant to me. Like, do I think that Adam and Eve were two historic, physically real people like me and my wife are like physical people? Um, yes, but because I also have a very strange way of understanding the nature of reality and myth. Like so like you've read the Space Trilogy, right?
Space, yeah.
Lewis's Space Trilogy?
Yeah, well, one of them at least. I read that Hideous Strength, which was the best one. I read
Yeah.
the Paralandra one too, and then there's the other one that I read part of.
Yeah, Out of the Silent Planet. So you like went
Yeah,
backwards.
yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah, yeah.
Very fitting. Uh so like in the end of that book, in that Hideous Strength, that's the one that I was want to talk about anyhow. And I think it makes sense of because really what's happening in that Space Trilogy is it's almost like I don't know that I've even realized this till now, at least to the degree that that the revelation that I'm realizing it now. But it's what's kind of fascinating about that book is in Out of the Silent Planet, you kind of have this man, you kind of have this guy who's religious, right? Because Ransom is a religious man. He believes these things, but he almost believes these things within a divided man modern consciousness, where like he's really kind of a materialist substance ontology physicalist, and he's layered on this supernaturalism. But then all of a sudden he finds himself in a physical way in outer space on these other planets. So it is a physical reality, but it's also like, but it also has like a pre-modern consciousness integrated spirituality. So like the natural supernatural thing on like in Paralandra or on Malacandra or something is
Yeah.
like it's in a porous kind of almost pre-modern pre-axial age consciousness. Like these people aren't living in this divided world where like the supernatural's up there, this Kantian world. But then so then like he believes this stuff in like a deeper way. But then in like that Hideous Strength, you have this Ransom, which is like a and see, Owen Barfield was like the genius behind all these Inklings, anyhow. But then in that Hideous Strength, you have a Ransom, which is like almost a glowing, bearded, quasi godlike um entering into like a final participatory thing, but on
Yeah.
the earth in this divided world.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you
yeah.
have Merlin, and then you
He's the
have
same
Merlin.
Christ, yeah.
So like Merlin, this is what I'm trying to get at. Like Merlin, and I think this book does a great job. Like is Merlin real? Well, hell yeah, in that book he's real. But like how does Merlin interact with the world and what kind of a person is he? And is he good and bad? And all those kinds of questions are irrelevant. You know, like that's not what's going on in that book. So like I in that sense, I'm trying to get to Merlin to just be like or King Arthur or something. Like are they real? Well, yeah, like of course they're real, but like the physicalist question to me, like I would probably affirm that too. But how does that look? Because of the nature of how consciousness is and like what you're bringing to it, you know, in kind of that the perceiver is necessary for perception. Like, what would it look like to experience being in the presence of Adam and Eve or Merlin? Like physically real things. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it would feel like being in the presence of like you and I being in the same room. Like
Yeah.
I don't even know how to talk about that stuff.
It gets at the kind of see, because when I started, it gets at the plasticity of things that divine simplicity is true, but in this kind of in this way that has a twist,
Yeah.
that nods to process the theism and the
Yeah.
immanence of God, because it says that everything that is in God is God,
Yeah.
but that we are in God in that way, and then in the way that God is ultimate reality, we inherit that dialetheia, that both and that two
Yeah.
valuedness that is part of the unlimited or the absolute, the unconditioned. And so
Yeah.
that's why everything has this paradoxical quality upon closer inspection at the level beyond the lie, the intelligible lie, and the
Hell yeah.
unintelligible truth, right? And so one wonders why it is that the experience of the other side, the supernatural, is so plastic. And that's why I also see, when I first started groping toward Christianity existentially, I didn't believe that I believed I was Christian. I really did believe, but I didn't know that I did. And it was
You
in the
didn't
Catholic.
think that you believed, maybe, to like
Correct.
smuggle in my stuff. Yeah.
Correct. And so the thing is, as I got more in my head, I was more Protestant, because I thought, well, if I really believe this stuff, then I don't believe this weird stuff about,
Mm-hmm.
like, let's say, divine simplicity, but also, Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
To me at that time didn't make sense. To me, divine simplicity, still the way that it's often described, divine simplicity, simpliciter, if you like, it doesn't really make sense. But I think it does make sense as this kind of paradoxical oscillation that we're talking about, self-resolving
Yeah.
paradox. Um, but the and that's what I mean again about, like, well, it's dogma. You have to believe absolute simplicity. Well, I can't believe it. I guess I'm not Catholic. Well, there's levels to this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
the thing is, because there's always that meta language. He's like that dude who said Catholicism is insufficiently phenomenological, because it doesn't recognize, because it makes the argument that you're trying to be your own pope, not recognizing that if you acknowledge the authority of the pope, you are yourself sort of placing yourself in the position of a pope to grant the
Right.
authority to the pope. Like if you
Well,
decide
then
to
that's the
become, like,
oxymoron of like the integrating the divided man. That exact thing. What you're
yeah,
just
yeah,
naming. Yes.
yeah. And so when I started, it was Catholic, but more Catholic-ish, and then I was like, no, to the extent that I understand it, it's like I'm Protestant, and now it's kind of bending back toward where it began, and feeling that, and I guess I asked, oh yeah, because I just realized the plasticity of theology, the dialectic nature of it, where it's like, whether the answer to this is yes or no, it's like it's the answer. It's both. Like
Totally.
the question is, why do you want to know?
Yes.
What is your motive?
Yes.
And can you know anything false through a true motive? Can you know anything true through a false motive? That's really what it came down to. And so this is where it comes to obedience. So it's like, and it's like, it's the role for obedience, like you have to submit to an authority. It's not that you believe this because, but the whole weird paradox of it is, of course, if you find yourself believing something or saying you believe something because you're submitting to an authority, that's only because on some level, the level of personal authority, you've granted authority to that, outside
Yeah.
of. But so I recognize the kind of paradox of it, but it's like at some point you got it. It's like it's the wrong question to ask. Oh, does it make sense up here? It's like there at a certain point, he's like, you can't. Oh, I don't know. This is difficult to explain, but for believing for the right reasons, you can even believe something false, but through, because the real like level on which reality comes into being is generative, and Langan calls it telic. It's to do with intention. It's
Yeah.
to do with your heart. That is what creates reality. In other words,
Yeah.
facts do care about your feelings in a way, because it's like
Yeah.
feelings, like they are what creates facts. And I persist in thinking of the atonement that way, where the way that his sacrifice accomplished what it didn't like flow into some divine bank account and make it go from being in the red to the black. That's not the mechanism.
Yeah.
The way that it worked is on that dimension of, I guess you would say, the law of attraction or something like that, the dimension of
Mm.
intention, where it's Christ Jesus self-sacrificial intention that allowed for otherness to the divine will. It allowed for the existence of this otherness to the divine will. And it was
Yeah.
necessary to hold it together, to hold the multiplicity in the unity, as his arms are, out on the cross. He is, as Maximus said, he's creating on the cross. No, in a symbolic sense, no, right there. It's like right there. And
Yeah.
he's holding the otherness together through that self-sacrificial intention. And
Yeah.
and so I don't know. So point being, what facts do care about your feelings. Point being, things have a plasticity. Point being, like, everyone's freaking weird near-death experience always conforms to their own categories, kind of thing. But that doesn't mean it's arbitrary. That's the
No.
weird, that there's something here that I don't understand. I truly don't. It's totally mystifying to me. That's why that dude Roy Showman, I hope I'm making sense to you. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, you are. You
that's
are.
that guy Roy Showman. He is his testimony is so compelling to me because he's a Jewish Harvard professor,
Mm-hmm.
and then he has this first he has this experience with a sort of unnamed God, the unknown God, and then a year later he dreams of Mary, and that causes him to convert to Catholicism, and so that evidence against interest is fascinating to me. The other thing about that though is that see the thing about it is that he goes through all this stuff. He looks at the he had an education, he had a Talmudic education, prior to going to MIT and then becoming a professor at Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
um and during which time he became an atheist. But he has some understanding of the Talmud and of what various Jewish saints have said and predicted, and he sees it all with this inevitable Christological focus, and for him it's so obvious. Now here's
Mm-hmm.
the thing. I don't think that you could look at the body of information that he's looking at as a neutral outside observer or whatever the hell that means. But what I really mean
Right.
is I don't think I could look at it in as neutral a guise as possible and say, "Oh yeah, this just clearly means Jesus." I think I would see some stuff that argues for it and some that cuts
Mm-hmm.
against it.
Yeah.
Is it two messiahs um like a who come at different times, or is it the same Messiah who comes at two different times? It kind of depends on your presuppositions. Now it's like this guy, he has this. I don't think he's lying when he had the dream about Mary. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done all that stuff that was so counter to his perceived identity.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's lying when he says he has the experience. But I think it's because he has had that experience that he just interprets the data in this way that it's like, oh, it's so obviously showing Christ, and that is. But
Yeah.
that's part of constructing reality, though. That's the Emmaus road where
Yeah.
where it's like they you search the scriptures because in them you think you have eternal life, but they speak of me. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
me. It's like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? It's like, how is it all about you? You're not even like linearly descended from like the line of David. Like that's from your father's side, not your mother. Like it's like
Yeah.
there's all this stuff that doesn't make sense literally, and it's but the thing is, I don't know, like truth is constructed, it's generated, and it's generated in this kind of subjective way, according like when the superposition is going to collapse, when the wave function is going to collapse, the way that it breaks is kind of constrained by the expectations or the bias of the perceiver, but on the
Mm.
unconscious level, not on this conscious level, right?
Yeah.
That's just that's the weirdness of it. That's like the objective subjectivity of it, right? That's the
Yeah.
ubiquitous relativization constraint. I don't know, I'm just gesturing at it. I'm just gesturing at it.
Well, the unconscious includes the conscious. That's really the way that I think see
Okay,
it.
that's
It's
correct.
it's
Yeah,
like,
that's right. And that video that you had, the live stream on the Grail Country, that was just, I was just bomb as hell. You were just hitting it out of the park. There's like multiple times consecutively in that one.
well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, no, we're talking
So,
about, because you had just read The Passenger and you're talking about
yeah,
how the unconscious is beneath the conscious, and the unconscious. That's the thing. You have the opposition, conscious and unconscious, and underneath that is sort of like you would say the
right.
unconscious.
Right.
Um,
Well, and that's almost like I see that almost, or like the subconscious maybe. But
or
that's
something.
almost the way that I understand that, is like that's the dream, or like that's the reality, and then and memory is this infinite recursion and reciprocity between all those levels. And I think what's happening in the evolution of consciousness and the modern consciousness is we're learning to both corporately and individually to to be uh to be at one in that distinction, that's like the self-divided God. It's like the henosis by the kenosis. In that
Yeah.
outpouring, in that constant flux, you have a unity. And it's almost like, even I probably need to go have lunch with the
Jesus is
family,
God. He's God. Yeah, yeah. He's there.
but it
He's
but
there in the moment of his mortality and his death. He's God. I that's the self division.
Yeah, and that to me, like that is the nature. All of that incarnational and atonement and Christological conversation is trying to get at the nature of the God-man relation. I mean, I
Yeah,
really think that's what
yeah,
I really think that's what everything, any meaningful, I was saying this to CW, I was interacting with him, I was forwarding him some of my thoughts, and I was saying any like um any honest uh philosophical pursuit is really is a conversation about that, the nature of the God-man relationship. And it's almost like you can be it's almost like if you seek, you find, and being honest. That's why I really like honesty, is that you can be I was gonna say this earlier, you can be honest. If you're honest in that pursuit, it's almost like you can oh shoot, you can integrate the you see the thing behind the thing behind the
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
doesn't even matter if you can name it.
yeah, yeah.
It's like a the distinctions no longer become a problem for you. I think a lot of people get really caught up in the distinctions and in the differences. And
Mhm.
it's almost like I don't care. It's like people who think I can be flip-floppy or wishy-washy, or I just like I'm overly agreeable, or what's Paul been talking about lately? Team winsome versus team disagreeable or whatever. It's just like it's a
Hillel
certain
versus
person.
Shammai.
Yeah. It's just like a certain person, like I can agree with anyone. Like I could talk to you. There's a certain spirit. It's because it's almost like it's like I'm a hyper spiritualist thing. Is like if I almost don't care about this, not the substance, but like the particularity, the precision of the words that you're saying are almost irrelevant to me.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah,
not.
yeah. Because it's the
Because
intentions. Because it's just about the
And it's
intentions.
not even the conscious intention. Like
Yeah.
the person in saying it may not even be conscious of their intention, because then you can get to the infinite regression of like
Mm.
trying to discern the proper intentionality, which is a trap too.
Mm.
It's like this. I can't even explain it. It's just like a spirit. I know when I'm talking to someone, and if I'm paying enough attention, again, like pay attention to what you pay attention to. When I'm talking, I know if I'm participating in that spirit or not. Like the precision of what I'm saying, like I don't know, that's what I call myopia, is like the people that get really caught up in the precision of what you're saying are losing the bigger picture. You will never see the thing behind the thing behind the thing. You'll never see the unity behind all distinction if you're in that mode. And that spirit is the thing that is constantly dividing. Like that is the thing that I think that's the thing that's actually anti-unity and multiplicity. It's actually anti-being. Like that's the spirit of the unman or whatever, the spirit of the Antichrist is the one who wants to focus on the distinction at the expense of the unity. And I'm not promoting a false unity. I'm not trying to say like the distinctions. Um, I'm not trying to promote like this kumbaya, like it doesn't matter, man. It's all cool. No, like it's this simultaneously. It's the unbearable lightness of being. It's this like simultaneous. Everything matters infinitely. Like if you knew how much everything mattered and every word that you spoke mattered, like on one hand, it would terrify you to hell.
Mm.
But on the other hand, like it's fine.
Mm.
It's cool.
Yeah.
And that's the right and the left hand of God, And there's a
Yeah.
place I think where you can get where it's the peace that passes understanding.
Yeah. 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 That
Um,
yeah.
I don't know. So that's all I got. I'm gonna go do lunch. But
Oh, okay. All right, you gotta head out now.
yeah, well, I'm like I've quarantined myself out in my in-laws house, and then I like had my wife walk in and like look, oh, and then like walk out, and then my son walked in and was like, uh-oh, and walked out. So I should probably go join the
Yeah, yeah,
brood.
we can close this out. But in conclusion, that's why everyone who's not a Catholic is a heretic, and that's why
Going to hell.
there's no salvation outside the church. And
Absolutely.
that's correct. And Thomas Aquinas said everything. And did you
And
know
I'm
there's
not Catholic, but I
did,
am.
did you know there's such a thing as Reformed Thomism?
No, but that's
In other words,
hilarious.
did you know the Reformed bros are getting way into Thomas Aquinas?
That makes perfect sense. Of course they would, because it's
It,
scholastic. That's their heritage.
that's the kind of thing where it's like, that's definitely Hegel laughing in his grave or something like that. It's like you didn't believe me about the dialectic, but it's like,
Well, that's kind of the ongoing joke about Hegel. It's just like in your disagreement with Hegel, are you affirming Hegel?
oh, okay, all right.
You
Well, then
know?
that's the real note that we'll end on. And
Okay.
happy holidays, everyone. Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas. All
Yeah,
right.
Merry
Put the
Christmas.
Christ in Christmas.
Yeah, because it's still ongoing. It's like what, the fourth day of Christmas or something like that.
My true love gave to me uh profoundly dull talk with Cal and Luke. That's
There
what
you
my
go.
daughter calls it. She says I say profound but boring things.
Yeah. There you. That's very true.
Oh, I'm sure. I hope this was to Jason. So Jason said, what did he say in his message? He said, like, try to keep it simple. Like this is a conversation. I mean, we can put it online, but like this is a conversation like just for us, probably.
Oh, I think I'm putting it up.
Yeah. I mean, we can. I would love it if people have thoughts and want to interact. I always like it, but it's kind of like I feel like I recently had a thing with the family where it was like describe yourself in one word. And I said, what did I say? I said, it was something like I can't even remember the two words that I said.
You're supposed to do one. See, I already knew that
I
what he
know.
would do is he wouldn't use one word, he would use two, like
I
agreeably
was I was
or something like
it
that.
was it was something like existentially idiosyncratic or something or like like annoyingly idiosyncratic or something. Um which is true. It's just like but part of it is like I lean into that intentionally. Like I have all my own vernacular and language, but that's because I'm a radical personalist. I'm like you don't understand you'll never understand anything unless you understand the person. You can't. Like if you think you understand what they're saying through the means of mammon and just like a common dictionary definition, well, me and you are in different worlds. I don't think anyone understands anything that way, not in the way that they're meant to understand things. And then somewhat that's like Hegel interestingly talked about that. There are these two, I need to rewatch this. I clipped it, but there are these two German words. Like one is, I can't remember. I think I shared it with you. It's like das und versus um Daschumpft or something like that. I can't remember what they were. I don't speak German, but he had this. It was interesting. It's one of those things. Joseph shared it with me, but it's this. Was Hegel a mystic? I think essentially, and I
Yeah,
went through all that, and I'm just like, good grief! I think I'm pretty Hegelian after watching this. And but he distinguished that thing. It's like the difference between. It's almost like the one is like the understanding of thinking. It's like thinking that you understand, and the other one is this deeper kind of noetic, heart level intention kind of understanding. He like distinguished two kinds of understanding, and I was just like, hell yeah, speaking my language. Of course, yeah, make up your own words. You have to. Like that's the only way you get at that second level of understanding, I think.
mm, mm.
Radical personalism.
Yeah, and kind of making the Bible your own too. I think it's probably very important that you have like your own maybe idiosyncratic understanding of certain verses. We talk about different levels of scriptural interpretation, but I think there are certain verses that say maybe you're the only commentator that can bring out the full meaning.
Of course. Of
Um,
course.
that has to, what is it? They said every Jew is a letter in the Torah.
I like it.
I believe that with respect to every everyone. uh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. This is just like that's kind of like the whole idea too of like we're either all saved or no one's saved, man.
Except you
Like
can't say that and be part of the true church. What the hell's wrong with you?
but
You
that's
know.
the thing, dude, with radical personalism. I think when you understand the nature of a person, it's just like if someone is damned, part of you is damned.
Mm, that's very true. It's
I
very
mean, it
true.
doesn't work that way,
Part of
I
God is
think. Yes.
because it in creating that person, God had something to say about himself he couldn't say without creating that person. That's what it means. Every Jew is a letter in the Torah.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
or at least I think so. Maybe Jacob and Joseph can come in with their facts and logic and just
Yeah,
decimate.
Hezi, get in here, do some commenting.
Maybe
Let's
that's
chew
best
this up.
for the best that they do so. But that's my interpretation of it. Um and yeah, I guess I won't submit to any authority on that and go to hell as a result. So it's
Yeah,
like
submit to your authority, Christ in you. Submit to that authority.
I don't yeah, well, I mean it's all in process, right? It's subject to further Hegelian transformations. So just
That's
just
right.
so just stay tuned for all that, I suppose.
Okay,
Uh
let's end it for real.
okay, we end it for real. Peace out.
Love you, Cal. Great combo.
Love you
Peace.
too.